It was late, and I was still at my desk in the study, finishing up some work. The house was unusually quiet, and I couldn't help but notice the emptiness that had settled in. My husband, Daniel, had been gone for hours, and I hadn't heard from him since the morning. I wasn't concerned at first. He was often caught up in work or meetings. But today was different. Today the silence felt heavy. The ringing of my phone pulled me from my thoughts. It was a message from a friend of mine, Maria, who had always been a bit too keen on offering advice. The message simply read, "Saw Daniel at the cafe with someone, a woman. She was young, definitely not someone you know." I stared at the message for a long time. The words didn't quite register at first. My mind raced. I had to be imagining things. Daniel would never. But deep down, a sinking feeling told me that Maria wasn't the type to make up something like this. It wasn't the first time that I had felt something shift between us, but I had brushed it off, chalking it up to the stress of work and life. I decided to call him. His phone went straight to voicemail. Another red flag. Minutes turned to hours, and still, there was no sign of him. I had never felt so alone in my marriage, even though I was sitting in the same house as my husband. The distance between us felt unbridgeable. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed my coat and headed to the cafe Maria had mentioned, my heart pounding in my chest. When I arrived, the familiar sight of Daniel sitting with a young woman confirmed everything. She was sitting too close to him, her hand brushing against his arm. She laughed at something he said, and I saw him smile in a way that I hadn't seen in months. The breath caught in my throat. It wasn't just that he was with someone else. It was the way they were together. It was the closeness, the intimacy that should have been mine. The sight of them made me feel like I had been punched in the stomach. I stood frozen for a moment, not knowing what to do, my mind racing with questions, doubts, and disbelief. I took a step back, feeling the anger and betrayal rise within me, but I couldn't just stand there. I walked into the cafe and straight toward them, my legs trembling. When Daniel saw me, his face went pale. His eyes widened as he looked from me to the woman beside him, his hand instinctively reaching out to her as if to shield her from what was to come. "Daniel," I said, my voice calm but sharp, betraying nothing of the storm that raged inside me. "Who is this?" he stammered, looking at me and then back at the woman. "Lena, I didn't let him finish." "Don't. Who is she?" I repeated, my voice louder now, attracting the attention of a few nearby patrons. He swallowed hard and glanced at the woman beside him, his eyes pleading with her. She didn't say anything, but her expression was one of nervousness, as if she had known this moment would come. I looked at her, taking in her youthful features, her flawless skin, her nervous smile. She was everything I wasn't anymore, young, carefree, and full of hope. She was everything I had once been when Daniel had first fallen in love with me. "Her name is Claire," Daniel finally muttered, avoiding my gaze. You didn't think I'd find out?" I interrupted. The anger inside me started to bubble to the surface. "You didn't think I'd see through this? See what was happening right in front of my eyes?" I'm sorry, Lena," he said. But his apology was weak. Nothing more than a lifeline he was hoping would reach me. "It's just what, Daniel?" I asked, my voice growing louder. "Just that you've been cheating on me with a younger woman? Is that what's been going on? Is this what our marriage has come to?" The silence in the cafe felt deafening, the air thick with tension. People were staring, but I couldn't care less. The only thing that mattered in that moment was that Daniel, my husband, the man I had trusted with my whole heart, had shattered everything. The life we built together, the love I thought we shared. It was all a lie. And then, the words I didn't expect to hear came out of Daniel's mouth. "I'm leaving you, Lena. I'm sorry, but I'm in love with her. I've been seeing Claire for months now." It was as if the ground beneath me had disappeared. My knees gave out, and I staggered back, catching myself on a nearby chair. I was stunned. His words, the finality in his tone, crushed me. This wasn't just an affair. This was an end to everything we had ever been. Claire, sitting across from him, looked at me sympathetically, but said nothing. She didn't have to. Her presence spoke volumes. She wasn't just a mistake, she was his choice, his future. I stood there, my mind spinning, heart shattering. He had made his choice. And for the first time in years, I realized that I wasn't the one he wanted. I was just the wife he had grown tired of. As I turned and walked out of the cafe, I felt a calmness settling over me, despite the fury and heartbreak swirling within. I had no idea what the next step was, but I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't the end of my story. It was just the beginning. The drive home was a blur. I barely remembered the streets I passed, my mind consumed by what had just happened. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white, but I couldn't feel them. I felt numb. Everything I had built with Daniel, the years of love, trust, and sacrifice, had been reduced to a hollow shell in the span of a few minutes. When I pulled into the driveway, I didn't know what I was expecting. Maybe an apology, maybe an explanation. But most of all, I wanted closure. I needed to understand how things had gone so terribly wrong. The front door creaked as I entered the house, the familiar scent of home feeling strangely foreign. The house that once echoed with laughter now felt eerily quiet. Daniel's jacket was slung over the chair in the entryway, and his shoes were left haphazardly by the door as though nothing had changed, as if he hadn't just shattered the foundation of our life together. I made my way to the living room, where the harsh fluorescent light of the chandelier cast long shadows over the space. I sat down on the couch, my hands trembling. I hadn't cried yet, not once, but the tears were coming. I could feel them sitting just behind my eyes, ready to spill over. The thought of my marriage crumbling, of Daniel choosing her over me, made my chest tighten. He had betrayed me, but I knew it wasn't just about the affair. It was about how he had treated me over the years, how he had taken me for granted, how he had allowed the slow unraveling of our relationship to pass by unnoticed, until he found someone else, someone younger, someone fresher. I ran my fingers through my hair, trying to breathe through the pain. But then it hit me. What now? What was I supposed to do with this devastation? How could I possibly move forward from this? I looked around the room, taking in the familiar details, the photographs on the walls, the cozy furniture, the way the sunlight had once filtered through the windows in the mornings. None of it mattered now. All the plans we had made, all the conversations about the future, the vacations, the house we'd one day buy, it was all gone. In its place was emptiness. I needed to take control. I couldn't sit around waiting for him to apologize, for him to come to his senses. No, I had to do something. I had to take charge of my life, of my future. It wasn't just about surviving this heartbreak. It was about reclaiming myself. The phone in my hand vibrated, breaking through my spiraling thoughts. It was a message from my best friend Kate, who had been with me through everything. She knew what Daniel was like, how he had always been distant at times, how he had failed to appreciate me. "Are you okay? Do you need me to come over?" I stared at the screen for a moment, not knowing how to respond. What could I say? That my whole world had been turned upside down? That the man I had loved had chosen someone else? That I was heartbroken and furious all at once? Instead, I typed, "I need some time to think. I'll call you later." The truth was, I wasn't okay. I was far from okay. But I couldn't let Kate or anyone else see how broken I felt. I couldn't let anyone know the full extent of my pain. Not yet. I needed a plan. I needed to show Daniel that I wasn't just some woman who would sit back and accept his betrayal. He thought he could leave me, humiliate me, and walk away without consequences. But I wouldn't let him get away with it. I had been loyal. I had supported him in every way possible. I had put my career on hold to help him pursue his ambitions. I had overlooked the signs when he pulled away emotionally. But this was different. This was a betrayal that I wasn't going to let slide. I stood up and walked to the desk, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. I was done being passive, done being the woman who always waited for things to fall into place. It was time to make things happen. Time to take back my life, my dignity, and my peace of mind. The first step was clear. I was going to make sure Daniel knew that leaving me would come with consequences. Real consequences. I didn't need him. I didn't need his apologies or his half-hearted explanations. What I needed was something more. I needed to prove that I was capable of rebuilding my life without him. I was going to take revenge. But not just any revenge. It was going to be big. It was going to be something that would make him regret everything. I smiled faintly at the thought, a sense of power beginning to rise within me. It wasn't over, not by a long shot. The days that followed were a blur of emotions: anger, disbelief, but mostly a fierce determination. Daniel's absence in the house was suffocating, but strangely, it gave me the space I needed to think, to plan. I spent hours in the quiet of my study, going through every detail, every aspect of our life together: the shared investments, the vacations we had taken, the businesses we had built together. I didn't need him to tell me what he'd done. I knew exactly what he thought of me now. He saw me as dispensable, someone who could be replaced with a younger, shinier version of me. But I had underestimated one thing. Daniel never realized who I truly was, what I was truly capable of, and now he was going to learn. I started by reaching out to people I hadn't spoken to in years: old friends, business associates, lawyers I had worked with in the past. I needed to gather resources, information, and leverage. If Daniel thought he could simply walk away without consequences, he was gravely mistaken. The first person I contacted was Anna, a former colleague of mine who had been part of a business project I had invested in long before I met Daniel. She was sharp, well-connected, and had a way of getting things done. She knew how to navigate the financial and legal side of things. She was the perfect ally. "Lena, you sound different. What's going on?" she asked when she answered the phone. I leaned back in my chair, taking a deep breath before answering. "Daniel's left me for another woman, a younger woman, and he thinks he can just walk away from everything we've built together. I need your help." There was a pause on the other end, followed by a soft sigh. "I'm sorry, Lena. I had a feeling something was off with you two, but you're right. You don't let someone like that walk away without making them feel the consequences." I felt a small surge of relief at her support. Anna wasn't just agreeing to help, she was on my side, understanding the depth of what had happened. "I need you to look into our investments. Find anything that could give me leverage. Maybe some hidden assets, something he hasn't told me about. And I want you to make sure the divorce papers are ready." Anna was quiet for a moment before answering. "Consider it done. I'll get the ball rolling." With Anna handling the financial side of things, I turned my attention to the next piece of the puzzle: making Daniel regret the affair. I needed to show him just how badly he had miscalculated, and I wasn't going to do it quietly. It wasn't enough for me to walk away. I needed to remind him of what he was losing. One of the things I had always prided myself on was my ability to maintain a certain level of grace and professionalism, even in the face of adversity, but Daniel had pushed me too far. He had destroyed that image. He had made me feel small and irrelevant. Now it was time to destroy his carefully cultivated world. I started by attending the gala he had planned with Claire. It was being held at one of the city's most upscale venues, an event that Daniel had orchestrated for his colleagues and business partners. The very thought of him showing off his new life made my blood boil, but I knew I had to be there. I couldn't let him believe he had truly moved on. I needed to show up and remind him of the life he was leaving behind. I went shopping for a dress, something bold, something that would make a statement. The dress I chose was a deep emerald green, one that complemented my figure and commanded attention without being overtly flashy. I knew that Daniel would be there, and I needed to look like the woman he had once adored, the woman he had taken for granted. On the night of the gala, I took my time getting ready. The whole process felt almost therapeutic, transforming myself into someone unrecognizable to him, a woman who had nothing to prove anymore. I had already known my worth, but tonight, I was going to show him exactly who he had lost. When I entered the venue, I could feel the eyes on me immediately. The buzz of conversation faltered for just a second as people turned to look. Daniel was standing near the bar, talking to Claire. The moment he saw me, his expression froze. He couldn't hide the shock that flashed across his face. I walked up to him slowly, making sure every step was deliberate. I felt his gaze on me, but I didn't acknowledge him right away. Instead, I turned to one of his colleagues, a woman I knew well, and greeted her with a smile. The coolness of the interaction made it clear to everyone around us that I wasn't the woman who had been left behind. I wasn't broken. I wasn't invisible. Finally, I faced Daniel. "Lena," he said, his voice a mix of surprise and guilt. "I didn't expect you to come." I smiled, though the expression didn't reach my eyes. You didn't think I would? That's a shame, Daniel. I thought we were still friends. Claire, standing beside him, gave me a nervous look but didn't say anything. She wasn't a threat to me, I realized. She was just a pawn in his game, someone he had chosen to fill the space I had left. But she didn't understand what she was stepping into. The rest of the night passed in a haze. Daniel tried to approach me several times, but each time I brushed him off. I spoke to his colleagues, smiled and laughed with people who had once been part of my life but were now strangers. I let Daniel see the way they responded to me, the way they still respected me, even when he had thrown me away. But the real plan was already set in motion. The seed had been planted. This night was only the beginning. The following days were a whirlwind of activity, each moment more calculated than the last. Daniel had reached out multiple times, trying to apologize, to explain, to make excuses. But I ignored him. I didn't need his apologies. I didn't need his reasons for why he had betrayed me. What I needed was to show him that his actions had consequences, and I wasn't going to let him forget that. I spent the next week meeting with lawyers, going over every detail of our financial situation. Anna had worked quickly, pulling together information on our shared investments, properties, and the accounts we had jointly managed. What Daniel hadn't realized, in his eagerness to leave me, was that he had left behind a trail of financial missteps. There were things he had hidden, ways he had tried to sidestep taxes, and accounts I had never seen. Things that, when revealed, would put his reputation and his future on the line. I called my lawyer, a woman named Karen, who had helped me with previous business dealings. She was tough, sharp, and knew how to play the game. Lena, you've got leverage here. It's not just about divorce settlements. We've got the ability to hit him where it hurts. His business, his reputation. We'll make sure this goes public, Karen said when I filled her in on the situation. I didn't respond immediately. The thought of tearing down everything Daniel had worked for wasn't what drove me. No, it was about making him feel what I had felt when I walked into that cafe and saw him with Claire. It was about forcing him to understand that his actions had stripped me of more than just my husband. He had taken away my trust, my dignity, and the life we had planned together. And I was going to take it all back. We spent hours putting together a strategy, laying the groundwork for a public fallout. The first step was to get the divorce papers filed and ensure that they were airtight. I wasn't going to give him any room to weasel his way out. This wasn't going to be a quiet, amicable split. No, this was going to be a fight. And I was going to make sure he knew exactly why. The next day, I sent the divorce papers to Daniel's office. I could already picture the look on his face when he opened that envelope. And I didn't care. I didn't care about his shock. I didn't care about his excuses. I had given him everything, and now I was taking it all back. It wasn't just about the money. It was about the control. I was taking control of my life again, and I was going to make sure Daniel realized that. Later that afternoon, I received a call from my lawyer. The conversation was brief, but it was enough to confirm that Daniel had been served. His reaction had been exactly what I expected. Confusion, anger, and disbelief. He hadn't seen it coming. He hadn't realized that I was capable of hitting back this hard. Lena, he's going to come for you now. Expect him to try and settle this quietly. He'll offer a deal, but you don't need to take it. We've got him cornered, Karen said, her voice low but assured. I felt a flicker of triumph. It was only a matter of time before Daniel came crawling back, desperate to salvage his reputation and keep his business intact. But I wasn't going to make it easy for him. I wasn't going to just let him pay me off and walk away with a clean conscience. No, I was going to make sure that everyone knew what he had done, and that Claire, his new partner, would be dragged into this mess too. I turned my attention to the next phase of my plan. It wasn't enough to just make Daniel regret his actions. It wasn't enough to tear apart his financial empire. I needed to make sure that the people who had once respected him saw him for who he truly was. A man who had betrayed his wife, a man who had been reckless, a man who thought he could escape without facing any consequences. I contacted a reporter I knew from my business dealings. He had always been interested in the intersection of corporate dealings and personal lives, something that could prove very useful. I had a few things to share with him, and I knew he'd be eager to get the scoop. I set up a meeting at a cafe, somewhere discreet. somewhere where no one could eavesdrop. When we met, I was calm, collected, and in control. I didn't need to explain myself to him. I didn't need to justify why I was doing this. All I needed to do was give him the facts, and he would do the rest. Daniel's business practices aren't as clean as they appear, I said, leaning in slightly, making sure he understood the gravity of what I was offering. There are things that haven't been disclosed, financial dealings that aren't exactly legal, things that he's tried to keep under wraps. I can give you everything you need to expose him. The reporter leaned forward, his interest piqued. He knew this was big. Bigger than just another scandal. This was about the fall of a man who had carefully built a reputation, a life, on lies. He smiled, already seeing the headline. "This will be a story that changes everything," he said. And that's when I knew that everything I had been working for, everything I had planned, was about to come to fruition. Daniel was going to lose everything. His business, his reputation, his carefully curated life. All of it would come crashing down. And it would all be because of his own choices. The more I thought about it, the more satisfying it became. He had chosen her over me. He had thrown me aside like I didn't matter, but I was about to remind him that I mattered more than he could ever understand. It was time to let the world know who Daniel truly was. It wasn't long before Daniel began to panic. The emails, the calls from his colleagues, the rumors spreading through the business world. It was all coming to a head. The story about his shady financial practices had hit the press, and it was everywhere. Headlines screamed about his questionable investments, his tax evasions, and the financial missteps that had been hidden for years. The reporter I had met with had done an excellent job. His exposé was far-reaching, and it was clear that Daniel's world was crumbling. But the real icing on the cake came when I received a call from my lawyer, Karen. "Lena, you're not going to believe this. He's trying to settle. He's begging for a quick divorce agreement. He wants to pay you off to make this go away, to keep it quiet. Don't give in. This is exactly what we've been waiting for." I couldn't help but feel a rush of satisfaction. He was finally realizing the gravity of his mistakes. He was no longer the untouchable man he thought he was. He wasn't just facing the dissolution of our marriage, but the destruction of everything he had worked so hard to build. I had always been the one to clean up his messes, but now I was the one dismantling everything. The calls from Daniel grew more frantic, but I didn't pick up. He sent texts, begging for a chance to explain, to fix things, but I wasn't interested in listening to him anymore. The man who had once been my husband, my partner, was now nothing but a reminder of the betrayal I had suffered. I didn't care about the money, I didn't care about the house or the car, or the possessions we had accumulated. What I cared about was this: Daniel had underestimated me. He had believed that I would be the one to suffer, the one who would be left behind, and that he could walk away unscathed. But I wasn't that woman anymore. The final nail in the coffin came when I received an invitation to one of Daniel's business events, the very one he had planned to showcase his new partnership with Claire. It was going to be held in the grand ballroom of a luxury hotel in the city, filled with his top clients, colleagues, and influential figures in the business world. The invitation was addressed to me, an invitation to a night where Daniel intended to present Claire as his new life partner. He had decided to make it public, to show off what he had chosen over me. But I had other plans. I didn't respond to the invitation. Instead, I called Karen, asking her to prepare the final legal documents for our divorce. I wasn't just going to sign them quietly and walk away. No. I wanted to make my presence known. I wanted to make sure that everyone in that room knew exactly what Daniel had done. And more importantly, I wanted to remind him just how wrong he had been to underestimate me. The night of the event, I dressed carefully, just as I had at the gala. I wanted to be the woman who walked into that room and stole the show. I arrived at the hotel early, making sure I had enough time to get settled before the crowd arrived. As the evening unfolded, I could see Daniel nervously trying to greet his guests, keeping a careful eye on Claire, who was laughing and mingling as though everything was perfectly fine. I approached the bar, making sure to stand directly in his line of sight. His eyes locked onto mine the moment I walked in, but I didn't acknowledge him. I didn't even flinch. He knew I was there, and he knew why. I made sure to engage with his colleagues, speaking confidently, holding my own in a room full of people who used to know me as his wife. And then, when the speeches began, Daniel took the stage to introduce Claire.
The applause was polite, but it felt forced, the kind of applause people give when they don't quite believe in what's happening. It was my moment. I stood up and walked to the front, interrupting Daniel mid-speech. "I'd like to say a few words," I said, my voice clear and unwavering. Daniel's face drained of color, but he couldn't stop me. He had no choice but to stand back and let me take the floor. I turned to the crowd, addressing them as though they were my friends, not his. "I'm Lena," I began, making sure my tone carried across the room. "And for those of you who don't know me, I was once married to Daniel. I'm here tonight because, unlike my ex-husband, I believe in transparency, in honesty. And what Daniel has failed to mention, what he's hidden from all of you, is that this isn't a new beginning for him. It's a new chapter built on lies, betrayal, and deceit." The room fell silent as I continued. Daniel left me for a younger woman, thinking that he could rebuild his life without facing the consequences. But what he forgot is that I'm not someone to be cast aside. I'm not someone who stays quiet and lets the world move on while I'm left to pick up the pieces. I could feel the eyes on me, some of them sympathetic, others shocked. But the truth was, I was done hiding. Done being the passive one in this story. "Daniel," I said, turning to him directly, "you didn't just leave me. You left behind every piece of us, every bit of the life we built together. And now, the world knows what kind of man you really are. A man who would destroy everything for his own selfish desires." Daniel's jaw clenched as I made my way off the stage. The room was still silent, the weight of my words hanging heavily in the air. But I knew something had shifted. In that moment, I had taken my power back. The fallout from that night was swift and brutal. By morning, the story of my interruption at the gala had spread like wildfire, and Daniel's reputation took another hit. The press covered the event, focusing not just on the public drama between him, Claire, and me, but also on the allegations that I had made about his business practices. The stories snowballed, and soon, everyone in the city knew about the man who had left his wife for a younger mistress, only to have his life exposed by the woman he had betrayed. Daniel tried to spin the story, to salvage his reputation, but it was too late. The damage had been done. His investors pulled out, his clients questioned his integrity, and the business he had worked so hard to build began to crumble. But the real satisfaction for me wasn't just seeing his empire fall. It wasn't the whispers that followed him or the calls from his colleagues now distancing themselves from him. It was the quiet moments, the ones where I saw him squirm in his new life, struggling to keep up appearances, while the cracks in his facade became more and more visible. And Claire? Well, she was just as lost as he was. As Daniel's life unraveled, so did hers. She began to realize that she wasn't the fresh start she thought she would be. She had simply become another casualty in Daniel's self-destructive choices. As for me, I moved forward. It wasn't easy. The pain of betrayal doesn't disappear overnight. But every day I woke up a little stronger. Every day I remembered why I had fought back. I remembered that I deserved better than a man who thought he could break me. And I wasn't going to let anyone forget that. Months passed and I focused on myself. I rebuilt my career, took on new projects, and surrounded myself with people who truly valued me. I started to feel like myself again, the woman who had been buried under the weight of a marriage that had never been what it seemed. I traveled. I pursued hobbies I had long forgotten about. I started a new chapter, not defined by the man who had left me, but by the woman I was becoming. One day, I received a message from Daniel. His words were as hollow as I had expected, asking for a chance to talk. He wanted to apologize. But the truth was, I didn't need his apology. I had already forgiven him in the way that mattered most, by walking away and taking back control of my life. I didn't respond to his message. He no longer held any power over me. As I stood on the balcony of my new apartment, overlooking the city that had once felt so suffocating, I realized that the past was behind me. The woman who had been betrayed, who had sought revenge, had become someone else entirely. I wasn't the victim anymore. I wasn't the one trying to piece together a broken life. I was the woman who had taken everything from him and rebuilt herself from the ground up. And I was finally free.